So my nose has been running all day, so if it starts running again, it's gonna be gross. I'm sorry, deal with it. My name is Alexander Perdion. I mentioned the internet when answering like where do arguments happen, and coincidentally, my topic is about the internet. So more specifically, net neutrality. So the internet's young, okay? So legislation hasn't caught up with everything new about the internet. It changed everything. So as things are catching up, we've been operating on old laws, including what has been described as the Title II of the Communications Act of 1934, which states, common carriers can't make any unjust or unreasonable discrimination in charges, practices, classifications, regulations, facilities, or services. This was meant for every form of communication, from telegrams, telephones, any form of communication. The government cannot regulate or have a bias towards any other, or anything that's unfair, basically. They can't have biases. So what does that mean? I'm gonna tell you why net neutrality is being challenged in this day and age by the FCC and internet service providers, which will be mentioned as ISPs from here on out, and how net neutrality protections help marginalized groups, and why repealing net neutrality would significantly harm those marginalized groups, and how net neutrality affects business, and not just like small businesses, but businesses on any scale. So from like mom and pop shop to Google, they'll be significantly affected if ISPs have the control to have a bias towards any of them. And this will all support the claim that if internet service providers, ISPs, succeed in reducing or eliminating net neutrality or Title II, the end users, us, you, me, Richard, will be significantly harmed. And okay, so my first point, why net neutrality is being challenged? So ISPs, so AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, they have been supporting lobbies to repeal Title II specifically. So for the purposes of cutting government red tape and regulations, that will help their, they haven't been specific about it, but they want to cut government regulations basically. So they want to, okay, they're cutting regulations so they don't have to have the internet fast lane for everybody. So let's say you are watching Netflix. Netflix takes a lot of bandwidth, right? So the power that it takes to run Netflix is much different than any other service, but by the laws of Title II and net neutrality, Netflix has to be treated the same way as, say, Facebook, which takes very little bandwidth. So repealing that will allow internet service providers not only to limit bandwidth usage, but also it gives them the power to pick and choose what you can see, listen to, or read online. And that will tie into my next point, net neutrality protections for marginalized groups. So if, keeping it general, if you have a vulnerable community or let's say an unpopular opinion or not widespread opinion, internet service providers, if it were to be profitable, they would have every reason to limit what people see, do, hear, or read online. And if it, like lobbyists that have money in Washington, they can use this power that the ISPs have as the, internet gatekeepers per se. They can instead pay the internet service providers, ISPs, instead of lobbying for limiting what people can say or do through actual legislation. They have all the power to limit or show bias towards anything online. And this ties into the next point, the net neutrality effects on business, like what you can say for marginalized groups or unpopular opinions. Businesses. Net neutrality protects all businesses. It protects everyone, like small or large. So ISPs were to take bribes from someone who has money and they want to promote their business ahead of another one, or even if they want to promote their own services, they can do that if Title II restrictions are repealed. The lower barrier of entry that net neutrality provides actually protects everyone, you, me, and every business, large or small. And these protections help us from being influenced by internet service providers and reducing or eliminating net neutrality. Title II will significantly harm us as a user. And
Have an outline for me? Outline? Were you going to give me that? Or are you just going to give it to me some other time? Thank you. All right. Alexander, it takes you 2 minutes and 20 seconds to get to your proposition, and before that we get a lot of background data that I'm not exactly sure clarifies what the argument's going to be. I think you need to get to the point a little bit more directly at the beginning of the speech. I know the subject's net neutrality, but you kind of beat around the bush going through a history lesson. It sounds like you're trying to preview what you're going to be talking about, but all of those points sound like they are, at best, the secondary issues. And like I said, finally you get to the main proposition, but it's well into the speech. And by that point, I think you're going to have lost some people who aren't sure what the heck is going on. You need a stronger organizational structure in the body of the speech. The first point that you have, you label it, and it's not a claim. It's why is it being challenged? Well, that's informational in nature. That's not a declarative inference that you're drawing. That's just a piece of information. And you don't even have any information about it except the explanation. I thought that the analogies that you gave were kind of interesting. We've got a lot of hypothetical examples as proof. There's not any authority, there's not any legal group, there's not any advocacy group, there's not any agency or example that you provide to prove any of the things that you're talking about. What you have are a series of hypothetical examples under conditional situations where something could happen, and I don't know what the likelihood of any of those things is. And as a result, I think that your proof needs to be a heck of a lot stronger. The relationship to Title II I thought was interesting at the beginning of the speech, but the net neutrality rules that were put into place just a couple of years ago, that seemed to be the thing that was the big issue. And so the argument about lifting them now, what's going to be substantially different between what happened 5 years before and what's happening now, what's going on right now that's protecting us, we should be able to get some of those examples. There should be some user that says, oh, you know, before net neutrality went into place, AT&T limited me, but now they don't limit me, and life is grand and beautiful, and I don't have anything that kind of fits into those categories. So I think that's a little bit problematic. As a result, the generalizations are a little vague. I think you do a nice job kind of explaining things and talking to us, but you have to have a point that you're making. You got to have some grounds to prove that point, and I think that's what's missing here. All right, thank you.